While some veteran stories are about time served in combat and heroic battles, today a lot of soldiers in the United States Army are stationed throughout the world as deterrents and peacekeepers to keep the world safe from potential threats. This is exactly what Captain Joseph Laible did during his service in the Army and his time stationed in the States and abroad. Laible was born in West Nyack, New York on April 20th, 1994, to Robert and Maria Laible. Joseph grew up in West Haverstraw, New York with his sister Nicole and his parents. Growing up, Mr. Laible went to the North Rockland Central School District, where he played football, wrestled, and ran cross country for the school. Other than sports, he was also a member of an electric car club at the school. Laible enlisted in the Army and went to the West Point Military Academy, where he studied for and received an undergraduate degree in history before attending a basic officer's leadership course at Fort Still in Oklahoma. He learned about how to calculate gun formulas, execute fire missions, as well as the tactics and strategy revolving around fire observation. His family was very proud of him, along with his cousin, for joining the Army because his family had a long history of joining the armed forces in times of war and helping defend our nation.
I would say I think my family is very proud. My cousin also joined the service. He did ROTC at St. John's. But they were all, I think our whole family is very proud for me and my cousin both serving the nation. We would be the first people on my mother's side of the family to serve in the United States military, let alone be officers in the military. My father's side, his father was a Marine in the Second World War, and his father's father was a merchant mariner who I think got pulled into the U.S. Navy in the First World War. So they were also very proud. My uncle on my father's side is also MIPD. He's a first responder. So I think they felt on both sides a great deal of pride and respect for our decision to serve.
Since Joseph lived in New York during the 9/11 terrorist attacks in 2001, a large motivator for him to join the Army was to fight in the War on Terror. After he was done with his course at Fort Still, Mr. Laible went to the National Training Center at Fort Irwin in California, where he was in awe at the amount of equipment and manpower he had witnessed. At the National Training Center, Mr. Laible was trained on how to handle combat scenarios, and for him, the best part of the training process was drawing up a plan and seeing that plan be properly and efficiently executed. But something he didn't fully appreciate about the training was the unwillingness to change from some of the other officers, as they were not open to the idea of transitioning from fighting terrorist cells in Afghanistan or Iraq and moving more towards a modern type of combat against a traditional enemy we have, such as China or Russia. After Mr. Laible finished training, he was assigned to the 1st Cavalry Division, 2nd Brigade Armored Brigade Combat Team stationed at Fort Hood, Texas, where he initially was a liaison between tankers and foot infantry, and for his artillery unit, where he would conduct an artillery strike after receiving orders from a commander over the radio. Since his specialty was artillery, he trained on platforms such as the M109 Paladin, which is a mechanized artillery piece on a tank chassis, as well as stationary pieces such as the M777 howitzer and the M119 howitzer. Since he has trained with and studied how the artillery pieces work, he said,
"The howitzer hasn't changed much since it came out. It's more the technology and propellant behind it."
When asked about the technology that he said has made artillery pieces easier to use, Mr. Laible responded,
Essentially, software computing basic math with a bunch of variables that affect the ballistics being calculated and updated from our other systems. So the observer would say, I want to shoot this target here. It would be a grid coordinate, or it could be a azimuth so you know where the person is, so you could draw a line on a map to where they're saying they want to shoot. They'll give you the distance, they'll give you the altitude. You can look at the map. You plot that target onto your targeting paper or your targeting computer. You run the calculations to see how you have to angle the weapon system, what propellant you have to put into the weapon system, what type of shell, what type of fuse, what type of, do you want a HE, do you want a white phosphorus, do you want a smoke, and then all these different shells and all these shell fuse combinations, the weather, all this stuff can be added into the formula, and that formula is calculated, and then once that's calculated, you check as the fire direction officer, you will check the map and your surroundings to identify if it's safe to fire or if it's needed and it's an assumed risk is checked valid enough, and then you initiate the fire mission and you tell the weapon systems to fire.
Mr. Laible was also taught how to fire artillery without using the software, and compared to using the software, it was much harder. And one thing he was grateful for was how easy the software was to use, because you would receive weather updates from the software, and the software wouldn't make as many mistakes when everything was being calculated. Mr. Laible also said that some difficulties with using artillery was mainly that U.S. forces were being taught to use less artillery and only 2 to 3 pieces during a mission, while European forces were being taught to use a lot of artillery during a mission. So he described the difference in tactics as a disconnect between the head commanders. Later in his service, Mr. Laible was stationed abroad in Europe in Torun, Poland, which is a city and home to a U.S. base in the north-central part of the country, as a part of Operation Atlantic Resolve, which was NATO's response to the Russian annexation of Crimea and parts of eastern Ukraine. While in Poland, he worked and trained with NATO forces from countries such as Poland, the Netherlands, France, and Germany. They also helped train forces from the Ukraine in case of a future conflict with Russia, which would end up happening in February of 2022. However, most of his time was spent at Fort Hood, Texas, where he continued to train and run operations with the 1st Cavalry Division. A normal day for Mr. Laible on base would have consisted of him showing up to physical training around 5:30 a.m., followed by splitting off by their separate batteries, and after a short break they would reform back into formation around 9 or 9:30. After a morning of training, personal tasks and maintenance would be completed, and finally a closing formation around 4 or 5 p.m. Throughout his service, Mr. Laible was able to stay in touch with his family via email, phone calls, and messaging. After his time in Texas and Poland, he was reassigned to Lemoyne, Pennsylvania, where he worked as a recruiting officer and a battalion operations officer until his discharge. On his last day of service, Mr. Laible recalled,
My last day, I remember I went into the recruiting battalion headquarters in Lemoyne, DLA facility, and just said goodbye to some of the peers I worked with there. I was only there, that unit, for I think like 8 months at that point, 9 months, and I was already doing like a job works program with my terminal leave. So the paperwork was processed. I was kind of just coming in to collect my things, say goodbye to everyone. But it was imagine how you would imagine like a corporate going away. Just say goodbye to everyone, and then just shook hands. Kept contacts, and then just left. I lived in the area, so I just remember going home and being like, "Dang, it's all over."
he was discharged with the rank of Captain 03. After his service was over and he had some time to reflect, Mr. Laible says the best part of serving in the military was the people he met during his service, describing the people as people who come from all walks of life, as well as people who were hardworking, dedicated, passionate, determined, and caring for their fellow service members and their country. However, a frustrating aspect for him was when these people who really cared and wanted to make a difference couldn't enact upon it due to being outranked by superiors. When asked about how he has readjusted to civilian life, Mr. Laible credits his wife, family, and friends from the service for helping him transition back into civilian life. While Mr. Laible does keep in touch with his friends over platforms such as Discord and is a member of the local VFW chapter in Myerstown, he does not attend veteran reunions, nor has he joined a specific veterans reunions group for his division. After his time in the service was over, Mr. Laible then worked at an Amazon facility as a cloud engineer before enrolling at Syracuse University, where he earned a graduate degree in computer science. Mr. Laible thanked the GI Bill and the people at the Department of Veterans Affairs for helping him settle back into civilian life and for helping him pursue an education at Syracuse. Mr. Laible said that the military has changed his life because of how he is able to view it and the people in it.
I think I spoke about earlier, kind of the empathy. It's definitely helped with that. It's definitely helped with, I guess more layman's terms, grit. Understanding that like when things are bad, could be so much worse. Being able to endure hardship, being able to identify good times. I think a lot of people miss that aspect in modern life. when things may seem in this world of comparisons and digital worlds, comparing can be difficult. But I think when you've done the hardships of military service, you can see the brightness and everything. So I think it helps with like a world perspective. I guess more of a social perspective and human perspective. I think also like directly just like discipline and being able to grind things out, being able to communicate with people, talk to people, because you have to work together in the military a lot with a bunch of people you agree or disagree with, but you have to get to work together to get the job done. So I think that's empathy, teamwork, grit, determination, and discipline.
When asked about a message he would like to leave for the future generations of Americans who listen to this story, he said,
I'll say that the American veteran is definitely extremely complex story for every person individually. And when I say that, I mean what it means to be a veteran. Just the differences between me and my family members who served. He deployed to combat zones. He served in the infantry. I didn't. I was an artilleryman. I had completely different experience with leadership and subordinates. Completely different geopolitical issues. One was fighting terrorism on the war on terror in Afghanistan. I was fighting more strategic deterrence effort in Europe. I know people who served in the Asia Pacific theaters. I know people who served in South America. So when you talk about a veteran, I think we tend to lump them into a group similar to as we do with everything else on the political spectrum. But like the average, not the average, all American veterans volunteered and are from vastly different walks of life, and they're all individuals. And I think that you should be very careful on generalizing the experiences of veterans. And I don't want to say it just because it's me, but there's a lot to military life outside of just combat operations, and there's a lot of hardships that you will see. So I think that empathy should be shown to everyone, but I think in particular, like people should also, no matter what your ideology or personal beliefs are, that there is a long struggle for the individual that call themselves a veteran in many walks of life, and for many reasons should be, you should understand that perspective of that person, if that makes sense.
and he also stated,
I guess just this could have been anyone. This could be you, the person listening, or father, mother, daughter, son. There's nothing special that I did. So this story in our country, the country people volunteer to do these things. It's just this could be anyone. So sorry.
Fine.
It's just there's nothing special I did. Nothing special most people do. These are regular people doing what I did. So there's regular people joining military service. These are your fellow citizens. These are Americans. These are the person you see in the street or school, or you don't talk to, or you do talk to. Anyone is capable of doing this, and people choose to do it. And I think it's very important to realize that I am an average person, and I am just an American citizen. Any citizen can do this, and it is a wonderful thing and a great thing. And I think that we should celebrate, the human ability to achieve these things. And I think everyone should understand that. I want to emphasize it particularly. There's no super soldiers. There's no special type of person. Anyone can do this. So when they do it, and they volunteer to do it, and they go through it, just remember that those people care about, at least for me, the idea of what it means to be an American and what it means to be a citizen, and how they want to help people ultimately.
Mr. Laible's time in the service can be described by the empathy and determination he had for his country. He was lucky to be serving with fellow soldiers who also shared the same determination, patriotism, and vision for their country as he felt. That collective spirit is exactly what makes the everyday men and women who serve in our country's armed forces essential to keep our country safe and free. I would like to thank Mr. Joseph Laible for his service to our country.